Hello, and welcome back to Play of the Game, the limited gameplay podcast where we actually play the games. So, we are back. We're recording again today, and we are going to have some more Lorwyn Eclipsed episodes for you. At the beginning of this, we just wanted to talk very briefly about the fact that there is a new set coming out, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set, and this is probably a good time to address what our philosophy is going to be about what formats we cover and kind of what topics we choose for episodes. So yeah, Jason, we were just talking about this right before we jumped on. What is the kind of approach we're going to take?
Basically, the TLDR is we're going to make this podcast, we are taking literal gameplay moments that we have from games that we've played. Notably, we are probably not going to play very much TMNT, because there's not very much reason to. Technically, I am later this weekend going to be in Richmond playing the limited qualifier there, which will be TMNT, but I'm not planning on doing that much prep for it. I'm kind of free rolling it off of judging the spotlight in Richmond a little bit. So the two of us don't really have very many plans of playing TMNT beyond that small amount. Maybe there will be an interesting spot from there that we can do one episode on or something. But so I guess for now we're just doing Lorwyn. I don't know. When does Strixhaven release?
I don't know.
I
It's
think
probably going to be a
something 2 months
while.
from now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically the philosophy is we're going to record episodes about the Magic we're actually playing, and we're not going to adjust the Magic we're actually playing to make better content for the podcast. That is the summary. That's what people should know. So for all intents and purposes, likely we will be doing more Lorwyn for the next month-ish, and then unclear. Maybe we'll do some weird arena formats that we've been playing or something in the space between Ninja Turtles and we could do constructed. That's always an option, although boo, stinky, yuck. But yeah, we'll figure it out. But we just kind of wanted to let people know that is generally the approach we're going to be taking. So don't expect us to be intentionally trying to get out content about whatever the newest set is. If we're not playing it, then we're not going to record content about it.
To be a little face up about behind the scenes, we generally record these in batches. Right now we're about to record 3 episodes back to back, so certainly this episode plus the next 2 will be Lorwyn.
Yeah,
we haven't figured out beyond that.
I figured people had probably pieced that together, but to make it explicit, that is what we do. Yeah. We have a lot of Magic stuff going on, and this is intentionally kind of a podcast that is in a format that makes it pretty easy for us to record in batches in a time efficient way. So yes, just so everyone knows. And yeah, jumping more into it, just to remind everyone, I guess we did forget to introduce ourselves at the top. So I'm Ryan, and
I'm Jason.
Yay! So just to remind everyone, here's what the podcast is. We every time discuss a single gameplay spot, and we recommend that you follow the link in the description to go see that gameplay spot, and we will be talking about that for the entire episode. So the spots that we're recording about today are all from the very fun, very exciting, a little bit exploitative and gambly limited championship qualifier on Arena that happened about a week ago. And yeah, I played a bunch of this. I did not end up doing very well. It was best of one draft.
0.
Yeah, well, you were at the RC, right? So it makes sense.
Yeah, mostly why, but I'm honestly glad I had the excuse not to after seeing what a bunch of people had to say about it.
Yeah. So I have a bunch of gameplay from this that we get to go through, and some really interesting spots. Magic gameplay is hard, even best of one. It's obviously better when you can kind of have the context of your opponent's deck, but gameplay is a huge differentiator in these kinds of long, grindy tournaments where you cannot take very many losses. So let's try to play well enough so that we don't take very many losses. So the first spot we have, Jason, do you want to break it down?
Yeah, so this is one of those classic early game spots here where it is turn 2. We're on the draw, I believe. Our opponent, I believe both players have kept 7 here. Yeah, yeah, looks like it. So our opponent has just led off with an island, a mountain, and a turn 2 what's called Flame Chain Marauder or something like that. I think that's what it's called. Um, that's the 2/2 elemental that for 1 in a red that you can pump 1 in a red for +1/+0 and menace until end of turn. So just like
A medium 2-drop.
2-drop that will attack, I guess. Not like super premium, but it's a 2-drop that is going to be attacking you. And we have a blue-white Merfolk deck. We've played plains and an island, and this is now our turn 2 after we've played our second land, and we're trying to decide what to do. And that decision is very simple here, in that there's only 2 choices. We can either do nothing, or we can cast our Spiral into Solitude onto this 2/2. That's the pacifism that you can blight and sack to exile the thing you pacified. The rest of our hand is 2 islands as the only land, so we don't have double white. But we have only white spells a little awkwardly, but hopefully it should be fine because it kind of looks like our hand is the kind of hand that only casts 1 spell per turn for a while anyways. So we have the aforementioned Spiral into Solitude, the pacifism. We have the 3-mana 1/3 flyer Tributary Vaulter. We have Protective Response. That's the convoke, destroy target attacking or blocking creature for 2 and a white. We have the Shore Lurker. That's the 3 and a white 3/3 flyer ETB Surveil one, Merfolk. And we have Sun-Dappled Celebrant, the 4 white convoke 5/6 vigilance. So yeah, our next few turns are like a little bit scripted, where we're gonna go like turn 3 play like either the Vaulter or Protective Response. Turn 4 play our Shore Lurker probably, and then probably work towards playing our Celebrant off of those 2. But the real question is, do we do nothing, or do we spend our removal spell on this dinky 2/2?
Yep. That's exactly the question. We can talk for a long time about this question, though, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going into it. So,
yeah,
this is pretty classically this kind of awkward hand that you are pretty much priced into keeping in Limited, where you don't really do that much in the early turns, but you have lands of both colors, you have spells you can cast. You might get into these awkward spots where you're like, oh, do I really want to use this removal on a 2-drop? But if I don't, I'm probably taking a lot of damage from it. That kind of thing. I mean, do you want to talk about, like, should we have kept this hand? Is that an interesting question here?
I mean, I assume you keep this hand.
From what I remember, it was island, plains on the draw with, like, Vaulter, Solitude, and Celebrant or something. Maybe Shore Lurker as well.
Okay.
We can actually go back and find it.
The 2 cards you've drawn are the Vaulter and a 3rd island. So you actually kept a hand where there was no proactive. You couldn't actually make a proactive play out of it, which is more sketchy, definitely.
And it depends on the deck. Like, we are blue-white Merfolk, which tends to be a relatively assertive deck in the format. We can take a look at the deck. It is a pretty assertive deck. I mean, it doesn't have that many 2-drops, but it has 4 Tributary Vaulters. We have some Ramekin Recluses to recoup tempo. We've got some Mara Sky Swimmers, which are nice if you can convoke them out early, so you really do want to have creatures on board early. I mean, it's the kind of thing where, like, no, this is not a hand that really works with our deck's game plan, and also pretty illegal to mulligan this, I think.
So, okay, here's the thing. And I might be giving a preview of what I think about this situation. So this is a hand where, like, wow, we're just talking about a different spot now. We said we would only talk about one spot, and now we're here talking about a mulligan decision. But so this is a hand where
it kind of plays into it, right? Because, like, how bad the spot is sort of, like, influenced by whether you think it's a tough mulligan decision or not.
Yeah. But either way, this hand, the only things it does before turn 4, right? And, like, a lot of times when I'm thinking about, so obviously in Limited, the main thing is, like, do you have lands and spells? Like, can you meaningfully cast spells across the course of the game? Is the thing that you often will think about when thinking about whether to mulligan limited hands, and that because like you don't need a bar that's much higher than that for keeping hands. But importantly, one bar that does matter, in addition to that, is can you not only cast spells, but can you cast like relevant spells before like turn 4. uh these days it's not good enough to have your first play be on turn 4, certainly, right? And this kind of hand, uh the only relevant spells it can cast before turn 4 are removal spells, which kind of like basically says that like if your opponent does like okay, if you just like think about it like from the other way, like, oh, why do we care about this? Well, we care about this because if we just let our opponent like play a creature on turn 2, a creature on turn 3, and then we haven't done anything to those, then we're probably going to be way behind tempo and we'll lose. So what that implies is that if our opponent does play a creature on turn 2 and a creature on turn 3, we're kind of priced into like doing something about that, right? Otherwise, like, we wouldn't keep this hand. And if we're priced into doing something about that, that implies that we are casting our removal spells on those creatures to not like fall infinitely far behind on tempo, right?
And then the main thing becomes, I think, like, is that a valid thing to do in the format you're playing? Can you spend removal spells on 2-drops? And in Lorwyn, it's pretty sketchy. It is something that you generally do not want to do because it's a format very much about power cards that have huge impacts on the game that you really need to answer. There is something to be said for like board presence snowball kind of thing being a part of how those power cards work, and so taking away their early board presence can make those cards worse if they can't like capitalize on the tribal synergies. But generally speaking, like, it has been a pretty consensus view that you do not want to be just firing off your removal on random creatures in this format. So something we probably do not want to be doing.
And on top of that, this deck specifically would probably struggle with doing that because there are only 3 removal spells in this deck.
Yes.
The Spiral into Solitude and the Protective Response that we already have in our hand, plus 1 Noggle to Mind. So if we use these removal spells, we're kind of just like out of them for the rest of the game, right? Like, we if our opponent plays something large later, we just have like no way to deal with it. And just like looking at the rest of our deck, the rest of our deck also just isn't that good at dealing with like.
It's bad when we're behind, and like we're trying to spend these removal spells to not be behind, but we then would need to really turn the corner quickly and close out the game. Otherwise, our opponent could just do 1 or 2 powerful things, and it would be very hard for us to kind of overcome that. That is generally the problem. So I think let's give a verdict on the hand though really quickly. Like, is it legal to mulligan this freaking hand, Jason?
Yes.
You think
100%.
so?
This is our actual episode. We're actually talking about this hand.
Okay. I'm still just of like the limited boomer brain where it feels turbo illegal for me to mulligan hand with 3 lands, 4 spells, 2 removal spells. The lands are our colors, and we can cast the spells realistically, all of them. That just feels to me like it's so hard to be like, no, not good enough, go to 6. You're saying that's what we want to do?
So first of all, we're talking enough about this hand that I'll say explicitly the contents are Plains, Island, Spiral into Solitude, Protective Response, Shore Lurker, and Sun-Dappled Celebrant. And I think we should include an image of that also.
Yes,
because
we should.
we've ended up veering into talking about this hand a lot. But basically, if you want to switch back to the like deck tab with the deck, I think. What? It's a little cut off, but it should be fine. It's showing the important part, anyways, which is that like the thing about this deck is that it's like very. Okay, sometimes you have a limited deck which is like playing a more mid-rangey game where like, you're just casting spells and like, sometimes the spells line up one way, sometimes they line up another way. Like, these are the kinds of limited decks that have like 5 removal spells, have a bunch of like creatures that function at like basically any point in the game. Maybe you're probably not doing that much synergy stuff, or the synergy stuff you're doing is stuff that is like that doesn't depend on you drawing your cards in the right order. decks like the kinds of soup decks that I often like drafting. Those kinds of decks, like yeah, you mostly just keep lands and spells that do things because like it'll all come out in the wash in the end. Like you're just gonna make trades and like um cast your spells and your spells will do things. The problem is that this is not that kind of deck.
Very much not.
Tributary Vaulter and Gravelgill Scoundrel or Gavelgill. I forgot if
It's
there's an R in
gravel.
that one.
Yeah.
Okay, Gravelgill
The
Scoundrel.
thing you
and
find at the
Tributary
bottom of
Vaulter.
a river.
Yeah, yeah. Um, those really are not the kinds of cards that like let you just cast your spells at whim, right? Like Tributary Vaulter is not a very good card if you're trying to block. Uh, especially if you're trying to block and don't have very many other creatures in play.
Agreed.
Right.
Very much agreed.
Same with a Gravelgill Scoundrel. Like honestly, kind of same with Marrow Sky Swimmer.
And
Like
really
you
Shore
have,
Lurker too. Like not the best blocker.
yeah. Like your deck is asking you to do something very specific. And the reason why in limited we often go like, oh yeah, we can just keep lands and spells is because limited decks are less focused. They're less about like trying to enact a very specific game plan, unlike in constructed where like everyone's talked a lot about how the London Mulligan is very strong and constructed because like in constructed you're trying to craft a very specific game plan, and so being able to mulligan towards crafting that specific game plan is much more important than like the one or two cards that you were giving up to do so. Whereas in limited, like if you don't have that specific game plan, maybe it's not as important. But I think that this is one of the exceptions where you do have
This is a
that
limited
very
deck
specific
that needs to play like a constructed deck is basically what we're saying.
Yeah, like I think like this limited deck really needs to be ahead, and your hand is like the antithesis of that. Your hand is like the hand that like would least be able to be ahead despite having lands and spells.
Yeah.
that this deck can generate.
I think that is correct. And yeah, I mean, maybe I can accept that we probably should have mulliganed this hand, which is a little bit crazy to me, but I think it's right. And I think the fact that my instincts were saying it once I had this decision to make on turn 2 is probably a sign that like my brain had somewhat figured that out, but hadn't really been able to commit to it. So
yeah. So here's the
let's
thing.
talk
Though.
about the decision. Oh yeah, you go ahead.
I do think that the mulligan decision is like a little bit close in that like on the play I would think harder about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also just true that like your opponent does not always play a 2-drop in this format, which is why that like being on the play might make it a little bit more forgivable, because if they don't play a 2-drop and you were on the play, it's pretty realistic that you can get on board first, just because our deck has so many 3-drops and 2-drops that like it's pretty reasonable that the hand becomes actually quite good if you just draw like one early play and a couple lands, and then you get to be like deploying your stuff before you get to use the removal. Okay, so back to the original decision that we wanted to talk about. We have now the sort of pessimistic, like the outcome we feared when we kept this hand. They played a random 2-drop that we really don't want to have to care about, but we probably have to care about it. Maybe. That's the question that we're asking, right? So like, what happens if we do not cast our removal, we decline to use it, we pass back, and they attack us for probably 2? That's like, realistic case. If they pump it, great. They're not spending their mana on anything else that affects the board. Okay? They don't pump it, they play something else. Now they've played, let's say, Flaring Center, right? That's if you see blue-red and you're thinking your opponent's going to cast a 3-drop, reasonable thing to expect.
Or like
something like that.
The 3-mana 2/4.
Yeah, something in those wit lines. Like reasonable common creature that is not amazing, that we're not trying to play around a bomb, but we're trying to play around normal curve. Then we untap, we play our 3rd land, we have the option of casting Tributary Vaulter or Protective Response. We cast Tributary Vaulter, let's say. Goes back to them. They cast random 4-drop, Flamekin Guildweaver. That's a 4/3. It doesn't really, like, maybe if it's the Colorwrath Mystic, it pumps it to a 4 and it can attack, but then they couldn't attack with Flame Chain. We would basically get like probably one decent block with our 1/3, but we'd still be falling very, very far behind on board.
Yeah, or I mean, okay, so if they like if they curved into Flaring Center, something with 3 power, then the next turn they're just going to attack us first before playing
Right,
anything,
they
and we
attack
can't
for
block because
5.
of the threat of
That's the
activation.
thing I was
Yeah.
kind of originally going towards, is like they get to attack us for 5, we can't use our Vaulter at all, then they get to play something else, and we are just like very behind, which is we're very
Yeah.
behind to a normal common curve that does nothing exceptional whatsoever. That's concerning.
Yeah.
This is why we are really heavily considering casting this removal spell. Downsides
Yeah, so,
of
like,
casting the removal spell are a little bit more nuanced and long term, but they're important also. I mean, the obvious downside is just we're using our removal spell on a creature that doesn't matter. You could argue, right? Maybe it does. Right? That's why we're considering it. But like, won't matter if we are able to prolong the game long enough where like there will be a clogged board. You could argue that our deck, as it's built, is a pretty like tempo-oriented deck that even if the opponent does something powerful, we still have one removal spell, so like that's reasonable, and B, we could potentially like race them in the air with flyers while jumping on the ground or something to kind of overcome whatever semi-strong thing that they did with our deck composition. We obviously don't totally have that set up now, but like we are setting up attack you for 6 in the air every turn. And so having a relatively high life total does make that plan a lot more appealing. So like it's not the worst, but if they play any kind of powerful like uncommon like a Twin Flame Travelers, right? We don't necessarily get to protective response that. We may need to spend 4 mana to get it off the board, using our Spiral into Solitude to actually have a chance, unless they like, we give them a chance to untap and play an Explosive Prodigy and kill something, doubled or whatever. I don't know. How are you thinking about this? How are you approaching it? Are you like, we probably just have to not fall too far behind and use our removal spell, but that's why we should have mulliganed the hand? Are you thinking, I think we can maybe get away with it and we should probably try to? Like, what are your instincts here?
Well, okay, so the thing is, like, okay, if you're not casting your removal spell here, you're kind of saying like, okay, I want to save this removal spell for something better. I'm like trying to play the Tributary Vaulter next turn. Maybe I'd rather remove their 3-drop or something, right? But like, the thing is, this 2/2 isn't that much worse than a random 3-drop for them, right? Because like it attacks very annoyingly into our stuff. Where like they can just attack as into our Tributary Vaulter, and we can't block with our Tributary Vaulter as long as they have 2 mana up. Same with like Shore Lurker, they can attack and threaten to trade with it, which is not like an amazing trade for us anyways. So like the 2/2 is like unfortunately relevant here because of the pump
We
ability.
don't really have a realistic path until like turn 5 for it to be blanked or taken out of the game, realistically.
Yeah, and even then, like on the turn that we cast our Sun Dappled Celebrant, like
Pump it, attack
there's
past.
like they can like pump it to give it menace and attack past the 5/6. Yeah, so I kind of have the inclination to just like remove the 2/2 and just like I think it's much easier for things to go wrong if we just like don't do anything here. Just like like our deck is all about racing, right? It's going to be much harder for us to justify playing out like Tributary Vaulter or Shore Lurker, these cards that don't block well, if we're under more pressure, right? Like I think if we like don't play the Spiral this turn and we're forced to play the Spiral next turn, that's kind of just like worse than like playing the Spiral this turn and playing the Tributary Vaulter next turn, even if like it's theoretically removing a quote better creature, you know?
Yeah. I think one of the ways I kind of think about this is that like the value of the Flame Chain Mauler is that it will get around 2 damage per turn for the next 4 turns, right? And so in that framing, the Flame Chain Mauler, which has already had mana spent on it, is equally valuable to like a Flaring Cinder that they might cast next turn, because that only has 3 turns to generate its value, and so you're basically adding 2 damage to the output of the Flame Chain Mauler to some extent, and that kind of equalizes the difference in their like overall quality in a long game. That's like one way to frame it. And there's also just the fact that like we're not spending the 2 mana that we have currently this turn otherwise, and so we are essentially asking, do we want to cast Spiral into Solitude for free next turn, assuming that we have to cast it on the Flame Chain Mauler? Is that better than being able to cast it on the Flaring Cinder, or, you know, insert random 3-drop here? It doesn't have to be Flaring Cinder, but like that's, you know, a way to think about it. If it, like, we would rather spend 2 mana just to be able to put it on the Flaring Cinder instead, that's not super clear, right? And so I think the question really is, do we want to basically spend 0 mana on it now, or do we want to spend 2 mana on it later for a better target? But the question of how you compare the quality of the targets is really how much value will they get over the course of the entire game. And there's a pretty good argument for this Flame Chain Mauler representing 8 damage plus continuing to be on the board late game and having it be somewhat relevant if they run out of spells and have 3 mountains and 3 islands in play and can just attack with it and force us to like double block in an awkward way, or, you know, do something like that. So I also lean towards using our removal spell now, which is unfortunate and something that we really kind of structurally don't want to be doing in the format. But I think this is an important spot in gameplay to recognize. I am just priced into making this decision based on the realistic ways this game could go, and I don't think I can afford to like make the scripted play, if that makes sense, of like, that card's not important enough, I'm not going to use a removal spell on it.
Yeah. On top of that, also, I want to highlight that like the like extra 2 mana that you'd be paying to like deal with to like be able to deal with like a quote better threat next turn is even more painful than just like 2 mana, because it's like casting Tributary Vaulter later makes it like worse, especially when we have Convoke spells in our hand. Like it,
and in our deck
that
too.
kind of
Yeah.
mana disadvantage like snowballs especially hard in this deck.
Yep.
In this kind of deck.
Absolutely. Also, we are a deck about racing, and decks about racing very much care about spending their mana efficiently, right? Like, you can't race well if you're not spending your mana. So, like, if we draw a Marrow Sky Swimmer, you know, eventually getting that down efficiently is going to be much harder if we are choked on whether just play our creature or play our removal spell next turn.
Yeah.
Okay, so all of that said, I think we agree, and I think this is a like relatively clear answer spot of we do actually want to cast this removal spell. We have a little bonus spot. We're kind of doing 2 bonuses in this episode, but we run into basically the same decision the following turn. They play random 3-drop, a Gangly Stompling, a 4/2 trample, roughly equivalent to Flaring Cinder, maybe slightly better on offense. And we can either play out our dinky 1/3 that can't block it effectively, or pass and use our final removal spell with only 1 left in the deck to not take 4 over the following couple turns and hope that like we're just keeping the pressure off enough that we can start to kind of turn the corner. What are your thoughts here? It is a slightly different decision. Do we want to take 4?
This is much harder because not only is it our like last removal spell in hand, and there's only 1 left in our deck, and that like meaningfully represents like something that is like even harder to give up than the spiral, right? Also, it's competing against the Tributary Vaulter, which while the Tributary Vaulter doesn't do all that much on this board, it still like helps progress our game.
It is
plan,
much
right?
better to like the idea of playing the Vaulter is that it will do something eventually in the game, and we have to get it on board before it has any chance of doing anything. So like, we are going to be spending the mana on it at some point, and spending the mana on it now is just as valuable as spending the mana on it later, even though it's not doing anything this turn. Like, I think that is a real argument that I do want people to internalize, that like it is not free to pass up on playing a spell using the mana that you know were going to use later on a spell, because the spell doesn't do anything during the turn that you're actually trying to play it out and like develop it in. That is really valuable, especially because we have Convoke in hand, and just because like we are going to want to turn the corner, and 0 mana Tributary Vaulter already in play that can attack is so much better at turning the corner than Tributary Vaulter in your hand that you have the mana to cast. So
Yeah.
that being said, though, yeah, it's still tough because like we're probably taking 8 from this Stompling. We could try to trade it with the Shore Lurker the following turn and then play out our Celebrant, but that feels kind of bad because the Celebrant, ideally, in a game that we're realistically having any chance in, is going to blank the 4-2. So, like, I think we're really trying to commit to taking 8 from it if we don't remove it this turn, which is tough.
The other thing is, like, the convoke in our the convoke on the spells in our hand also makes things interesting, where like playing Vaulter helps with, like, playing Vaulter is nice for helping with convoke because it, you know, adds a creature to the board, which will then like perhaps like tap for mana for convoke. For example, you can imagine playing Vaulter this turn, and then next turn if we draw a 3-drop, play the 3-drop and then like convoke out protective response.
And we have a lot of 2s and 3s that would be able to like make this play happen. Yeah. So it's pretty realistic that we could do that.
And also on top of that, protective response having convoke means that like casting it now it costs a full 3 mana, but maybe casting it later it costs like only 1 or 2 or even 0 mana, right? So like casting the Tributary Vaulter right now, like in some sense represents like possibly banking up more mana for the future for convoke reasons, though only somewhat nebulously, because like if we just imagine drawing a land off the top, it doesn't actually help us cast more spells next turn if we cast the Vaulter this turn.
Yeah, it's a very long-term theoretical mana banking, which is hard when you're under a lot of pressure and your primary thing is to like, if we don't die, then we could maybe turn the corner. You kind of have to not die first.
So it's like, I don't know. I'm really torn on this decision because like 8 damage is a lot of damage to take from this gangly stompling theoretically if we're not like removing it, and like and also on the other hand, getting on board is nice. Maybe banking mana for convoke is nice. Having a removal spell left in our hand for something scarier is nice. It's all weird.
It's very weird. I think where I lean, I think we have to take 8. I think we have to get this Vaulter down, not use our final removal spell, take 8, like fall a little bit low, get out our board, right? Like get out a 3/3 flyer, a 1/3, a 5/6, and then at some point cast a free protective response to come back. That is my guess. I think that like we are just falling too far behind if we're banking convoke spells in our hand and not developing to the board at all. Especially given that like, yeah, 8 damage is a lot, but in a game, you know, if they have a removal spell for our 5/6, I think I'm just like, okay, saying we lost this game and, you know, that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? So assuming that happens, we are basically letting the Gangly Stompling say, Lava Axe you for 8, and then don't do anything for the rest of the game, or like do very little for the rest of the game. And I think that is the kind of play that helps you turn the corner a lot of games, where once we have our board presence, we can kind of do things like attack with 5/6, leave up protective response, blow out a double block, and that really like helps us kind of turn the corner in that effective way. But we need to really commit to really going hard after that position and getting there as fast as possible. And I think playing out a creature is the right way to do that. It's not obvious by any means. There are certainly ways we could get tempoed out if we do this, but I do think that part of the format consideration and like the kind of rules of engagement in the format is that like it's possible that this deck can tempo us out. But I think more likely is that this deck is going to be playing for some kind of long game. They could somewhat realistically just like play Island next turn, and their plan for the turn is cast an Unexpected Assistance, right? And just continue digging to find their Kolrath Zealots and their Twin Flame Travelers and whatever. And in that case, we're going to be very happy that we deployed the Tributary Vaulter. Even if they play like Flamekin Guildweaver or something, 4/3 trample, we can play our Shore Lurker, we can try to trade off for it. We still took 8, and then the next turn we can play our 5/6 and hope that stabilizes us. Like, I think it's probably just better to be slightly optimistic and say we are going to be able to blank this at some point, and ow, it really hurts. Ow, we're taking a lot, but like, we have to commit to that pain to eventually have a strong chance of winning. That's my guess, but it's very close. I'm not totally sure.
You know, as they say, life is a resource.
Life is very much a resource. I think this was a very interesting set of spots where, like, it's the same decision in some ways, but the specifics of how we're spending our mana, what we actually value in terms of removing, what is going to be annoying for us long term, and like the importance of the other opportunity is we can cast our creature versus the other opportunity is we just save our removal spell and waste our mana, is a huge factor here. And I think that's like a pretty important thing that people will scan these spots a lot of the time, is saying, oh, it's the same thing. Do I want to use the removal spell or not? Because playing the creature is like the thing I would do regardless, but it doesn't do very much. I think it's different, actually. It's actually meaningfully different if you have another way to use the mana, even if that way to use the mana doesn't do anything right now. Cool.
Also, I would like to maybe phrase it as we pacified the 2/2 so that we maybe have the option here of playing the Vaulter.
Totally. These two plays back to back are coherent with each other in a really important way. Like, you cannot make the play of developing if you did not pacify the 2/2.
Yeah. Taking a billion is a lot more than taking 8. I haven't figured out what a billion means here. But
it's something in the order of like 12 or something. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that was kind of one spot. I'm sure we'll have more episodes like this in the future.
Respots.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. We can do what we want. It's our podcast. Cool. So where can you find us? I am on Patreon at Ryan C MTG. I'm also on Blue Sky, r-condon.bsky.social. Jason, where can people find you?
I'm generally JasonILTG in various places on Discord, Blue Sky, wherever. I go sub to this one's Patreon.
All right. Thank you, as always, for the plug. And yeah, until next time, keep making good plays.